Proportional Response, Book 1, Chapter 22, Part 11, Motives, Secrets, and Speculation. The Beether got a strange far-off look in his eye, one that Hannibal felt a little surprised he could read on the insectoid face without his translator having to explain. The man continued.
Those days in the egg were something. We sat and talked, all day, every day, to one another, searching the limited vocabulary and hazy, almost memories encoded in our genes, listening to the educational materials they played for us, and trying to understand what it meant.
He gave a short, soft laugh.
We got so much of it so wildly wrong, and on some level, we knew we had it so wrong, but we didn't care. We dreamed, we talked, we planned. I wanted to know it all, swore I would learn everything the universe had to know, read every book. If I ever figured out what a book was, consume all of the data ever, and have wisdom that everyone sought. My sister, though, even then she chuffed under the idea of any sort of restriction. She almost tried to hatch herself early a few times, growing tired of the restrictions of the shell. She wanted to see the universe, stand everywhere, see it all with her own eyes, once we figured out what seeing meant.
The Beether sighed slightly, and Hannibal translated the man's body language as 98% likely an expression of melancholy before he continued.
Those were heady days. The universe was to be our egg, and we'd make sure the other did well.
Ingthal shook himself slightly and seemed to notice his audience again.
Life in the hatchery was hard. They didn't allow fighting, but being an egg-bonded pair brought resentment from the other hatchlings and some of the staff, so we learned to rely on one another even more. It didn't take long before we realized our dreams after a fashion. We got me set up as an information broker and her with a ship. Beether ships are rare. Beether ship captains who actively seek to explore even more so. We used my connections to help her find both contracts and treasure, and she made all sorts of friends that helped me expand my network. We were an unstoppable team. Then came yet another war, and the Zoltans stepped in like they do. Their pirates preyed on anyone in the conflict zone, neutral or not, which is why we were careful.
Ingthal began to grow agitated again, but before Inbile could speak, the man shook his head and made a dismissive gesture.
Suffice it to say that we kept her ship well away from the conflict zones, and it didn't matter. She surrendered without a fight, and it didn't matter. I raised unholy hell with our ambassador at the time, and managed to get him to do the same in the council chamber, and it didn't matter. The privateer was disciplined by publicly stripping him of his ship, then privately giving him a medal, inducting him into their military, and putting him in charge of a frigate.
Ingthal banged his hand on his table and fell silent. Hannibal couldn't help but be moved by the story. Now I understand why he has always been so opposed to those privateering laws, but isn't fighting them now. Still.
Ambassador Ingthal, I sympathize with your loss, at least as best I can, without having shared a bond of the sort that you had to have had with your sister. Still, we are running a very disciplined operation with a very complicated plan.
Ingthal held up a hand, sighed deeply, and spoke.
Everything I've related to you is old. Remember that Duke Kazlor here is probably the only person I am speaking to who is older than me. I have settled my wilder impulses on this long ago, and the destruction of both that pirate ship and the frigate which housed its previous captain will never be chalked up to anything but an accident. I assure you, I have the calm and foresight to be an asset to your plans to put Duke Kazlor behind the Prime Minister's podium, and for the transformations to our league you plan to follow, and I want all of that just as much as you do.
Oh shit. He knows. How in all of the heavens and hells does he know? Hannibal stared around the room, and everyone, except, oddly, his aunt Eldia, seemed just as nonplussed as himself. Ingthal, on the other hand, sat there looking somewhat pleased with himself. Hannibal felt like everything was spinning out of control. If he knows, who else has figured it out? I mean, Henry has made no secret of his intent to take the podium as soon as a vote can be taken, and Kazlor hasn't put up more opposition than anyone else. If we're being... His aunt didn't give the rest of them long to recover from the bombshell.
Oh, come off it, all of you. This guy is one of the best information brokers to come out of a race of information brokers. Do you really think he can't see the patterns with patterns that you are weaving? I mean, really? You act like just because he and his kind don't practice deception themselves, it means that they can't pierce it, when they see it.
She rolled her eyes and spoke in a sardonic tone.
By the 32 hells of our 3 species people, really. I'd even say that their predilection against deception makes them better at spotting it, sometimes.
She then turned her head.
And you can wipe that smirk off your mandibles. No, don't sit there and act like you weren't smirking either. Your kind wrote half the translation code in my implants, and it pegs with the body language just fine, thank you. You know good and well that you will be an excellent asset to what is going on, and now that you've told us why you are so heavens bent on seeing the lizards laying low, you need to convince us you can approach all this with a cool head, and use cerebral shock tactics is not exactly the best way to do that.
Inibal tried to ground himself through his aunt's words, and it seemed to help a little. Golna had recovered, however, as had Kaz, but she beat her husband to the punch by holding up a placating hand and speaking in slightly wry tones.
It isn't necessarily the worst way to do it either, darling.
She flashed a large smile to take any sting out of her words.
I mean, we are talking about driving an idea through 2 of the hardest heads in the league.
She pointed at Kaz and Henry. Yoro made a soft noise and muttered,
2?
Golna speared her with a half-mocking, hard look and quirked an eyebrow.
Okay, maybe 4.
Yoro gave a wry smile in return. Golna turned to face Inkthal.
So, letting all of us know that you have been aware of what we were doing and have been quietly helping from the sidelines, when you could have pushed your way in sooner and taken a more direct piece of the action, is not the worst way of assuring US that you have your own vendetta under control.
Everyone sat silent again, though the tenor of the silence had changed dramatically. She's right. All of them are right. How much of Inkthal's data comes from educated guesses that he is able to chase down and confirm? Also, he is removed from this conflict and surely gets told things that even I am not. The man's value as a direct, clandestine asset is... Kaz finally spoke.
Okay, Inkthal. You proved your point. Should I forward a full copy of the plan to you, or do you have a copy of it already?
Kaz quirked an eyebrow at the insectoid at the last, and got back a chitter of amusement in return.
Oh, I don't have a copy of the plan itself, never fear. Though, not for a lack of trying, I assure you. Human systems are, indeed, hard to penetrate.
Henry sat a little straighter at this, but kept silent.
I have my own file of what I have guessed of your plan, and what some of your more likely contingencies might be, but have not felt the need to be involved directly, until now.
Inibal sat forward at that, and asked the obvious question.
Okay then. Why now? Because you are grossly underestimating and discounting the Penigra, and that could be a disaster for us all.
Inibal felt himself slump slightly in his chair, and watched everyone else take on various countenances of disappointment. Everyone except Yoro. She gave him an inscrutable look, took her hand out of his. When did she grab my hand anyway? And leaned forward as she spoke in soft tones.
That is a bold claim to make, Ambassador Inkthal, and I know enough of you to know that you wouldn't make such a statement from a dislike of the Penigra, nor your race's long-standing feud with. In fact, I seem to remember something about you having a friendship with their previous ambassador.
Inibal felt his hands blush slightly, and just managed to catch the look of chagrin on Henry's face before Inkthal answered.
Yes, that woman and I shared many an enjoyable afternoon in discussions of philosophy, art, and sports. Fascinating lady, really, and had such an interesting take on life. It is a shame they reassigned her. Anyway, neither of us had any of our own interests tied up in nutrient paste, so we had little real contention between us. Oh, we argued our sides in the council as necessary, of course, but even in that, we managed to reach a certain détente. Unlike the blowhard they have in there now, whose house owns nearly a third of their paste production. Anyway, my point is that I don't harbor ill will towards the species in general, and know a bit more about their empire than even my predecessors did. And that is what has me so concerned. It is no secret that they are a highly insular society, and only care about the rest of us insofar as we keep sending them the products which they desire.